Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemaphilepod.com. Our guest today, Geeta Gadbhir, has worked with some of the most accomplished filmmakers of recent time, including Robert Altman, the Coen brothers, Merchant Ivory, as well as Spike Lee and Sam Pollard. Her own work includes I Am Evidence, Call Center Blues, Why We Hate, and many, many other projects. She's here today to talk about her Oscar-nominated documentary feature film called The Perfect Neighbor. The film explores a tight-knit community experiencing relentless harassment by a neighbor whose hostility escalates into a fatal crime. Using police body cam footage to reveal the in-the-moment conversations between law enforcement and the neighbors, the film illustrates the impact of these controversial yet widely common laws. The main one explored here is Stand Your Ground. It is a very compelling film, and it's an honor to bring back to the program director, producer, writer, Geeta Gadbhir. Geeta, welcome back to Cinemophile.
Thank you for having me.
It is a very emotional film, very edge of your seat watching it, and it's told almost exclusively through the body cams of law enforcement showing up on the scene. Where did you hear about the story of what we see?
Sure. So Ajika Owens was a friend of my family. She was my sister-in-law's best friend. So, and when I say sister-in-law, I really mean my cousin. She's my cousin-in-law, but there's no term for that. She's we don't culturally use that term. But so my sister-in-law lived with, and still lives in Florida in the same community. The night that Ajika was murdered, we got a distress call from my family. And when I say we, I mean myself and my husband, who is also producer on this film, Nakan Kwantu, and my team at Message Pictures, Elisa Payne and Sam Pollard. And we were immediately on the ground trying to help support the family by keeping the story in the news. That was really our biggest concern because we know without media pressure that cases like Ajika's can go really without any sort of justice. Or they can languish or they can be swept under the rug. Unfortunately, gun violence is so common in the US that there's almost a fight to get media attention around each case, because they are daily, literally daily.
Yeah.
So I think so that's how we got involved. And then about Susan was eventually arrested, and about 2 months later, she was not initially arrested because there was a stand your ground investigation, and we were deeply concerned about that because we have the precursor of Trayvon Martin, which again, a murder that happened in Florida, where the shooter, George Zimmerman, used stand your ground to get off, even though he had stalked Trayvon and started an incident with him. About 2 months later, the lawyers who were working with the family, Benjamin Crump and Anthony Thomas, sent us the files they had gotten from the police department, and they used the Freedom of Information Act to acquire them, and they then became public record. And they sent them to us asking for us to look through them to see if there was anything that might be useful for the media or that, might be important for the case. It was a lot of footage. I had never seen so much before pertaining to a case. It was, body camera footage, dash cam footage, detective interviews, 911 calls. All of these were in these files. There was also some ring camera footage. We strung it out. I actually strung it out. I used to be an editor. It was
Yeah.
very disorganized. The files were just kind of thrown in folders. And again, this is not media that was ever meant to be seen other than, it was meant to be just police evidence. But I strung it out in a timeline and synced it and, figured out the chronology of everything. And when we watched it down after that, myself and Nakan, again, my producer, I realized that there was a movie there, that I could make something out of this, a film out of this. And the hope was we could make a film out of this, to get this story out. It didn't feel to any of us, including Ajika's mother, that justice should end in the courtroom. That there, we wanted more for Ajika's legacy. We didn't want to feel that her death had been in vain and she's just sort of another statistic. We wanted to get her story out and use it to make change. And also, my hope was if we could sell the film, that I could, the money from the film could go to the family because
Yeah.
we had nothing else to offer them. We're just
Yeah.
filmmakers and not, not particularly like not wealthy at that, right? And we are not doctors or lawyers, or therapists. So that's how we got involved, and that's how we made the film independently. Took it to Sundance, and Netflix bought it out of there. We were able to use the proceeds to support the family, and now we are here.
What a ride. What a remarkable ride. And again, I say this all the time. People are probably sick of me saying it. Thank God that documentary filmmakers have instincts for what's a story, what's a kind of story that I can tell with what I have available to me. And God bless you for your ability to be able to at some I know you said when you were watching this the footage that you saw from the body cams you saw a story. And boy, is it powerful. I mean, it is immensely powerful. And you mentioned Trayvon Martin. That's the very first time me, or I think a lot of people in the country actually had heard of Stand Your Ground law.
Yes. Recent law, like 2005, is
Yeah,
when it was written in Marion County in Ocala, Florida, which is interesting, where this
really.
shooting, Ajika's, was where that shooting took place.
And so, well, for me personally, to hear about this law was shocking and disconcerting, especially where it came from. I knew it came from Florida. So there were a lot of elements beyond the fact that this is a law. And then secondly, where it was given birth, if you will. All of those two things are very troubling on the
Yeah.
surface.
No, absolutely. And I think stand your ground laws, unfortunately play a role endangering the lives, particularly of people of color, because
Yeah.
people pervert the law to commit crimes and then claim self-defense. And again, stand your ground exists in about 38 states in some shape, form, or fashion, and the tenets are different. But in Florida, for example, it's incredibly dangerous because the law states that if you are anywhere lawfully, and you feel that your life is in imminent danger, you have the right to defend yourself using deadly force without having the duty to retreat. And the threat can be perceived. So, again, your own biases are obviously going to come into play around what is a threat. For example, if I am walking home late at night and there is a man behind me and I have a gun, is he like, maybe I decide he's a threat.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a man behind me. I'm frightened. I'm scared, right? And it also puts a lens on the bias of fear, right?
Yeah.
Like who, again, and unfortunately in a racialized society where people of color are so often deemed threats, just because of that bias, that puts us in incredible danger.
The person using the law for whatever reason become judge, jury, and executioner in many
100%.
many of the cases. And there is some statistics that are addressed in the film, and I don't want to give too much away here, but talk about it if you want. There has been an increase. If you do want to talk about this,
An
we'll do.
11, yes,
Yeah.
stand your ground laws have created an 11% increase in homicides. So I think that is, again, that's enough information to make us doubt the need for this law. And we have always in the US been able to claim self-defense in a court of law, right?
Yeah.
Self-defense has always been an option for people to use. So why do we need this additional layer of a predatory law? Dangerous and
I
harmful.
think you've given the answer in some manner of
Yeah.
speaking. I
And
mean,
and
it's
I just want to share too that this law was penned by a Republican lawmaker and with tremendous support from the NRA. So what does that tell you?
it tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah,
And the film, as we've been talking about the body cam, getting to know the families involved, getting to know Susan Lorenz. Am I saying that correctly, Lorenz? And Ajika Owens and These are kids playing in a yard adjacent to this woman's property, doing what kids do, running around, doing stuff over the course of the day. And this sort of is the pretext for how all of this kind of unfolds. And then you have Susan coming out, and we see in body cam coming out on a regular basis. The police talk openly about how many times they've been called, or it's a regular thing. And one of the things about the film that gives that perspective of the incremental increases in the tension that you can see in many different ways in the film as the film progresses, and this constant of her being, in a manner of speaking, either in anger, a hair trigger anger that seems to be coming up a lot over the course of the film. It's a constant. I don't know. Does that film footage, the cam footage that we see in the film, does that play a role in the trial? How did
I
that?
we honestly believe that without that footage, that who knows how the trial could have gone because it would have been Susan's word against the children, you
Okay.
know? So who
But
knows?
but my question is it regular? I think you answered the question. Is it regularly used in these situations?
Body
Police
camera
talk?
footage, I mean, it's only required, it's only law that body camera footage be worn by, that cameras be worn by law enforcement in 8 states at this time. So that tells you, that there's a much greater need for it. Honestly, it's a double-edged sword, body camera footage, because it's a tool of surveillance. And for vulnerable communities and communities of color, again, there is always that question, right, of how the police use it, how they surveil the community, and how they also have learned to work around it in some cases, right? Where they know if their camera is on, they might attack someone and then say, stop resisting. And they've learned to sort of try to figure out, how to manipulate it. But at the same time, when we're living in a time where ICE is, government agents, masked, armed government agents are kidnapping people off the street and putting them in detention centers, which are akin to concentration camps. I
Right.
think that, and then we have the powers that be at hand that are willing to absolutely distort the truth and on a whim.
Well,
Um,
they're not wearing body cams.
no, but now there's a question of whether they need to be required to, right?
Right. That's the
So
big. Well,
yeah,
after
that's the big question.
watching them murder people in the
So we
streets.
have we have people obviously filming with cell phone footage.
Yeah.
So I think the idea that law enforcement and government agents should be required to wear it
Yeah.
is critical. Like we were hoping that this film would work its way out of a job in some ways when it came out. And unfortunately, it's more relevant than ever because body camera footage becomes so important in discerning the truth around crimes and also the behavior of government agents.
Amazing. It really is a powerful film. Ajika Owens and her family, her young son. Oh my God, what her young son went through. Is
It's a
that
it's a
it?
heartbreaker.
Yeah. I've forgotten his name. Is it Izzy?
There was two. There's Isaac and Izzy.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it was very complicated for us. We struggled with whether or not to leave some of that footage in as filmmakers because it is indeed the worst day of these children's lives. And what's very
Yeah.
interesting with the film, people respond more to the grief of the children than they almost do the shooting.
Yeah.
Because we're so used to, unfortunately, seeing violence against Black bodies on repeat. It is absolutely re-traumatizing for the Black community, but I think shootings are so common that the shooting doesn't spark the grief as much as the seeing the children being
Sure.
told.
Sure.
And for us, we fully understood this is the worst day of their lives. And I think their grandmother, who's the bravest person I know, was like, you leave that footage in. You leave it in because that is the true cost of gun violence, and people need to see it because we're numb to the shootings, we're numb to the life being lost. But let them see what my grandkids went through. Let the world see that because that is their shame, right? If my grandchildren had to go through that, then the world needs to bear witness. So
Uh,
that's
yeah.
that's what we left it in.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it is a finalist for this year's Oscar. Congratulations on the journey of this film and of your work, and much, much deserved for that. Geeta. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
I just want to let our audience, our listeners know that you've worked with Spike Lee, you've obviously Sam Pollard, who is friend of the show if there ever was one. He's been on 5 or 6 times himself. You've also worked with Merchant Ivory, the Coen brothers, Robert Altman, my favorite American director, maybe my favorite, I'm not sure. But anyway, one of the you had the people you've worked with, your films. I Am Evidence is I think the first time you were on the program. Amazing, another great documentary film. So much work here. Congratulations. Keep doing all the things you've been doing and trust your instincts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with the director of this incredible film called The Perfect Neighbor, Geeta Gambhir. Thank you so much and all the best. I hope these
Thank you.
next few weeks will be fruitful for you and
Let's see.
beyond.
It's an honor to be here, honestly. It's an honor to come, to be nominated. We're thrilled.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.